You're listening to the Remote Millionaires Podcast, the show for aspiring and established entrepreneurs who want to create and scale six-figure success online without being chained to a job, location, or computer. I'm your host, Tom Gaddis. Let's dive in. Aloha and welcome to the Remote Millionaires Podcast. Sherry Bonelli, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Tom. How are you?
I am awesome. By the way, I love the poster right over your head. Success is the best revenge. I love it.
You know what? I had a few people in mind when I hung that one up.
Yeah, that's good. I love having little mementos and tokens all over my office that remind me of why I'm doing what I'm doing and staying on track and really just keep me motivated. So that's awesome to see.
Yep.
Yeah, great. Well, welcome to the podcast. I know you were on my previous podcast, What's the Secret, a while back, but now we've rolled out this new Remote Millionaires podcast. You're a member of Remote Millionaires. I think you're in your second year there. One of the great things about Remote Millionaires, for those of you listening, is not only are there people that, people come in because they're looking to build their business and grow their business and all that stuff too, but we also have a lot of very, very smart and highly qualified experts in various subjects that are in the program as well. Sherry's one of them. Specifically, she's an expert in Google business and SEO. She's been published on a search engine journal, right? Like a bunch of different SEO sites. So a lot of great stuff out there. But maybe you can tell listeners a little bit about you, where you're at, what you do. And
Yeah, absolutely. So I got started a really long time ago, back in 1998. So what is that, 24 years ago? So I'm a dinosaur when it comes to digital marketing and search engine optimization. And I've really seen the industry change. I primarily focus on search engine optimization, content, local SEO primarily, and my main area of expertise, as you mentioned, is Google Business Profile, which is formerly known as Google My Business. And I'm a Google Business Profile Platinum Product Expert. And basically what that means is Google has product expert programs for almost all of their tools. So they have YouTube product experts and Gmail product experts. And basically those product experts help out on the help forums. And Google keeps an eye on who's answering those questions correctly, who's known in the industry, who writes articles about Google Business Profile and all that kind of stuff. And then they invite people to be part of the program. And so it's been invitation only, and you kind of work your way up from gold to silver to platinum to diamond. And so I'm at the platinum level. And we're under NDA. We don't work for Google, but we're under NDA. So we can't tell everybody what we're talking about, but we meet with Google on a weekly basis. It's kind of great because if we see trends, like we suddenly notice that reviews are missing, we can let Google know that. If we see issues that are going on, we can alert Google to those issues. We can offer feedback that we're hearing from merchants. And it's a great way for us to kind of offer some feedback to Google about the tool.
That's great. What an accomplishment. That's amazing. Fun. Congratulations. Yeah. Well, you mentioned that you're in local SEO, Google Business Profile, those types of things. I know there's a lot of people in our community, and especially in Remote Millionaires specifically, that are looking to add SEO as a service. Obviously we do that a lot in our agency. Maybe you can tell listeners a little bit of the difference between what people call national SEO versus local SEO, and why specifically would they want to focus on one or the other?
Right. So I created a LinkedIn learning course specifically about local SEO. And that was one of the things I had to think about when I was creating and thinking about mapping out that course in my head, because there are slight differences. And one of the main differences is when you're working on local SEO, part of the reason why I like it is it's easier to get your clients to rank because your competition is not as stiff. If you think about ranking an online only business, for instance, where they're competing nationally or internationally, you're up against a lot of competition. Whereas when you're competing locally, you may be competing with 30 or 40, maybe depending on how large the city is. And that's pretty achievable if you know what you're doing. So you get the help of Google Business Profiles, depending on if that business meets with local customers, and most of them do. So you can claim that, and that will help your clients rank. You can create pages that are specifically around their location. And depending on what they do, you can also reach out to other businesses and maybe create content that, they can use on their site and get some backlinks that way too. So there's a lot of different local strategies that you can use. So for instance, I was helping out, some car dealers in Kentucky. And so we would have every other month a feature where we would write about what sponsorships and nonprofits they were promoting and helping out. And we would write about those nonprofits, and then those nonprofits would then in turn link back to that page. And so we'd get backlinks that way. So there's just a lot more opportunity. And so it's
That's a great strategy, by the way.
Yeah,
that's a great strategy that you just laid out there.
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. So. I hope you're taking notes. No, that's really, really good. Well, and when you're talking about local SEO specifically, you mentioned Google Business Profile, which is formerly Google My Business, but you're also talking about like the maps listings too, correct?
They're basically the same. Yes. So the only way you can really get on Google Maps is if you have a brick and mortar. You can show up if you have a service area business on Maps, but people can't get directions because you have to hide your listing. Because if you work out of your home, for instance, people don't need to get directions to your house. So there's rules.
It's interesting that you mention that, because the question we get all the time is, how can I get a Google Business Profile without having an actual address? And I always tell people, I hate to tell you this, but I don't know of a way to do that that's not against Google's terms of service.
Yeah.
Right? You have to follow their things. So
yep. You need to have me on just talk about that.
Yeah. It's crazy, right? Everybody's trying to figure out a way around it, but it's you just got to do it. We basically list our agency we have a physical location now, but before we had the physical location, we just used our home address and the service area. The way that
so you just hide your address. But I do the same thing, but if I search for my agency, I still show up on Maps. There's no directions. Yeah. So, but who cares, right? Nobody's going to drive to my house anyway. So,
yeah, right. Well, you'd hope not.
Yeah,
right?
I hope not. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Google Business Profile, and we were talking about their terms of service, because another thing that I've seen with members in our Remote Millionaires community is they have clients that have had their Google Business Profiles suspended. So maybe you can talk a little bit, how common is that? What's a typical thing that would get a business's profile suspended? And then maybe we can touch just a little bit on what are some steps they can take if that happens to a client of theirs or something like that.
Absolutely. So suspension and reinstatement can be a little bit tricky. And I've been actually getting quite a few clients that I've been helping to get reinstated. I actually wrote an article, I think it was for Search Engine Journal, Tom, that I can give you to put in the show notes if you'd like, about
that'd be great.
What caused my listing to get suspended. But there's a variety of reasons. A lot of the time it's because it's a service area business that either is displaying their address, or they're using a PO box, virtual office, or co-working space. That's a lot of the reasons. Sometimes they may be keyword stuffing their business name. So they may be calling themselves best lawyer or best injury lawyer in Atlanta. And that's not their real business name. Often it is because they're in what we call a duress category. There are some really spammy categories on Google where people will set up fake listings. And so those categories are just prone to getting suspended. Even if the business owner didn't even do anything wrong, Google is very reactive because they don't want consumers getting scammed. And so garage door companies, landscaping companies, tree services, plumbers, those categories are just automatically on heightened alert. So if they change their category or add a category or change their business name, boom, they can get suspended. And so, they can just get caught up in that. But those are a lot of the reasons why you're suspended. And what I tell people is read the guidelines and then go line by line and figure out, did I change something? If so, what did I change? Did, I add an agency? Well, maybe that agency has been up to no good, and that everybody that agency manages, maybe all of those businesses got suspended. And if so, you need to take that agency off and don't let them manage your business profile anymore. And then you can file for reinstatement and hopefully get reinstated.
Those are good tips. one of the things that came to mind while we were talking about this, because I'm like, oh, we just kind of jumped in the deep end, right? We're talking about Google business profiles getting suspended, how to get them back, those types of things.
Right.
But it occurred to me while we were talking about this stuff, like, oh, there's probably people listening to this podcast. They're trying to get their agency off the ground. They want to do some SEO. Mm-hmm. So, as someone who writes articles on a lot of the prominent search engine sites and things like that, mm-hmm. what do you think is the best path to kind of, because it's such a broad subject. I always struggle when people ask me that, they say, well, how did you learn? It's like, well, I just freaking read everything I could about
I
it.
did too.
Everywhere I could find it, and you learn the terminology. But is there some specific tip you could give somebody of a place to start? Would you recommend they start with local SEO, Google Business Profile, or some other place? Or
yeah, so if you know nothing about search engine optimization, I would recommend offering Google Business Profile services. But I will tell you, you have to know the rules, because I cannot tell you how many people that I see give webinars and they are telling people to do the wrong things. Yeah. And that is the worst. I mean, I cringe when I hear people giving the wrong advice. And so you really need to know the rules up and down. And one of the ways you can learn those rules is by watching the Google Business Profile Help Forum. You just need to search for those keywords. And then you will see expert profile people that are answering those questions. Take notes and write all that stuff down, because those will help you when you have questions. And then you'll eventually start to learn, okay, so when this happens, I know that I need to do this. That's how I learned. A lot of the things that I learned is I just kind of observed how other product experts were answering questions and went, oh, now I know the rules to that. Now I know how to handle that. Mm. And so reading the guidelines is a must. Looking at the help files is a must. And then just make sure you don't get your business and your clients suspended if you can help it. For sure.
Yeah. And a lot of that comes down to knowing the guidelines, right? Mm-hmm. Really going to Google and looking at that stuff and realizing that there's really not a way, or if you're going to knowingly violate those guidelines, you run the risk of these things happening. Right.
Right. And the guidelines,
that's the big thing.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize the guidelines change, and Google can add one line, one sentence to the guidelines, and suddenly your listing can be non-compliant. They can change one thing. And so I usually tell people read it once every couple of months just to make sure that nothing changed that would put your business in jeopardy. The other thing people need to be aware of is that anybody can change your client's listings at any time, and those changes can go live. And so you need to also be aware to check and make sure that nobody changed their website URL or their business name or their categories or added something that may also trigger a suspension too.
Interesting. So yeah, keep up to date on the guidelines, and then make sure you're checking your clients' profiles and things regularly so that they're up to date.
Definitely.
Awesome. We talked a little bit about SEO, and I know you have the agency side of things too. You work with clients.
Yep.
What advice would you give to somebody listening to this that wants to get in, maybe add some SEO to their agency, maybe bring in a few SEO clients? Any little tidbits or things you've learned through a hard work experience that might help them kind of get over that hump and move forward?
Yeah. So, I will tell you that they're Moz, for instance, Moz.com has a great beginner's guide. If you do a search for Moz.com, SEO beginner's guide, they have a great beginner's guide. I would start reading that. I would start by looking at some of the SEO websites and webinars that are out there, but make sure they're put on by credible people. And I would do a search on LinkedIn, make sure that they do a lot of speaking, make sure they write for Search Engine Land or Search Engine Journal or SEMrush or one of the top websites. Those people that are writing for those types of websites they only accept people that know what they're talking about. They don't let just anybody write for them. So look for writers on those websites, because if they have training, it's going to be good. They're going to know what they're talking about. And then absorb as much as you can. And just know that Google now is not really looking at keywords. They're really looking at more topics. They don't want you to write content for keywords anymore. They want you to write content for the user. And so they recently came out with what's called the helpful content update. And we're still kind of waiting to see how that all shakes out and whether or not it's really going to do much as far as rankings go. But basically what Google is telling people is write content that's going to help the user. If you write content that is going to answer the user's question and they don't have to go back to Google and do a bunch more searches, then we're going to start to realize that your site is important and your site has great content and you're kind of an expert in your industry. So we're going to give you a boost in the rankings. If it's not, we're going to devalue your site and probably drop your rankings. And it could be a really big deal.
Wow, that's super interesting. Super, super interesting. Something to keep an eye on for sure.
Definitely.
Awesome.
So think more of topics versus plugging those keywords in.
Interesting. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, Sherry, listen, it's awesome having you inside Remote Millionaires. Your information, your knowledge, I see you sharing with other members and stuff. It's really great. I appreciate you being on the podcast. I'm going to put links to some of the things that Sherry mentioned on the show notes of this page. But where can listeners go to find out more about you and what you're doing and see some of your stuff?
Yeah, so I'm real active on Twitter. So that's at Sherry Bonelli, SherryBonelli. And I'm also real active on LinkedIn as well. And it's the same handle. So you can go ahead and find me there, or you can visit my website at earlybirddigitalmarketing.com.
Great. And I'll put those links on the show notes page as well. Sherry, thanks so much for being here. If you enjoyed this episode, please do us a favor. Go to wherever you listen to this podcast. Leave us a review. We'd really appreciate that. Sherry, thanks again for being here. I know our listeners are going to get a lot of value out of this call.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I will see our listeners, or actually you'll hear or see me, however you consume this podcast, on the next episode of the Remote Millionaires podcast coming next Thursday. So until then, stay safe, practice aloha, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Remote Millionaires podcast. Hey, if what you've heard today on the Remote Millionaires podcast resonates with you and you want to continue the conversation, then I want to personally invite you to head over to remotemillionaires.com and schedule your free Remote Millionaires business development call. We will analyze your business and show you exactly how to accelerate your results and build a wildly successful business you can run from anywhere. Until next time, Tom Gaddis, signing off.